This year, we are lucky to experience a pretty rare calendar occurrence, something that I myself have never experienced since I became a rabbi, and that's when Erev Pesach Shechalios B'Shabbos, when the eve of Passover comes and falls on Shabbat like it does this year. And it poses all types of interesting and practical and halachic questions. When do you burn the chametz? What do you eat for lechem mishnah to make hamotzi on Shabbos? What do you do about Sudah Shlishi? What do you do about the fast of the firstborn? And over the last few weeks, we've discussed and we've learned these ideas and more in other videos. But there's actually a very interesting and maybe not quite as well-known custom that's actually practiced special when it comes to Erev Pesach that comes on Shabbat like this year. As we all know, there's a special Haftorah that is read on Shabbat Hagadol, the Shabbat before Pesach, taken from Malachi, which foretells of the time of Mashiach and rebukes the Jewish people for putting the wicked on a pedestal, for not serving Hashem, and ends with a proclamation about the final redemption. And the Haftorah ends with the famous line of Hine Anochi Sholeach Lachem et Eliyahu Hanavi Lifnei Bo Yom Hashem Hagadol VeHanora, that Hashem promises to send Eliyahu to redeem the Jewish people before the coming on the awesome and fearful day of Hashem. But what's interesting is that many communities read this Haftorah only when Shabbat Hagadol falls on Erev Pesach, like it does this year. On the other hand, others, like our community, actually read it every Shabbat Hagadol, every year, whether or not Erev Pesach comes on Shabbat. And the question I want to pose is, where and why is there this discrepancy? Why do some communities only read about this prophecy of the coming of Eliyahu and the time of Mashiach? Why do they only read it when Erev Pesach comes specifically on Shabbat, whereas many others like ours, and really, if not most communities, read it every year on the Shabbos before Pesach? And so allow me to share with you an incredible idea from the Menachem Tzion, who answers our question. You see, the Gemara Eruvin teaches that while Eliyahu Hanavi is set to come to herald in the time of the Mashiach, to come the day before Mashiach to announce Mashiach's presence, there are actually specific days that Eliyahu Hanavi can't come. And those days, the Gemara tells us, are Erev Shabbos and Erev Yontif, on Friday afternoon and on an Erev Yontif right before the holidays. And why, the Gemara asks, why does Eliyahu Hanavi not come at that time? Well, it's very simple. Because these are times when we're so busy running around and getting everything ready that we wouldn't be able to even take notice and give the moment the proper attention that it deserves. Just think about how crazy things are each and every Friday, each and every Erev Shabbat, whether it's during the summertime, at the late Shabbos, or even in the winter time, when early Shabbos. There never is enough time on Erev Shabbos. And for this reason, the Gemara tells us that Eliyahu Hanavi won't come on those days, on Erev Shabbos and Erev Yontif. But the Menachem Tzion says something amazing. It says there's one exception to this rule. There is one Erev Yom Tov in which we are not rushing. One day every few years that is so rare and special that it is the exception to the rule. And that is Erev Pesach that falls on Shabbat. And for this reason, many had the custom to only read this Haftorah that describes Eliyahu's coming, specifically on Shabbat Hagadol like this year, when Erev Pesach comes on Shabbat. Because you see, it is this weekend in which there is a special opportunity for Eliyahu and for Mashiach to come. A moment when we're not rushing into the holidays or into Shabbat. And perhaps this also can help us explain another famous Gemara taken from Masechet Shabbat, in which the rabbis, in which Chazal teach that if the Jewish people would just keep 2 Shabbatot, just 2 Shabboses, that miyad nigalin, that we would immediately be redeemed. What do we mean when we say shtei Shabbatot, 2 Shabboses? What do we mean by that? And so the Ateret Yeshua uses this idea from Menachem Tzion to explain that there is only one time when there can be 2 Shabbatot back to back, and that is Erev Pesach, which falls on Shabbat, which means that the very next day is also a Shabbat of sorts, and that it is a Chag. It is only in this permutation this year where we have this unique ability to fulfill the words of the Gemara of keeping 2 Shabbatot, the Shabbat of Erev Pesach, and the first day of Pesach itself, the very next day. It's in a year like this that the Geula, that the redemption can come. It's not only that Eliyahu is destined to come on an Erev Yontif on Shabbos like we have this year, but that we are uniquely positioned with Shtei Shabbatot to be Nigalin, 2 Shabbases to be redeemed. And what's amazing is that if we actually look back through Jewish history, some of the biggest moments for our people took place in a year just like this. The Imri Noam teaches, based on the day of the death of Moshe Rabbeinu, that the year that the Jewish people actually entered into the land of Israel, that was also a year when Erev Pesach fell on Shabbat. But more than that, Chazal, our rabbis, teach us that the year of Hakamas HaMishkan, the year the Mishkan was established and consecrated, that also was a year when Erev Pesach came on Shabbat. If we want to say it differently, Erev Pesach on Shabbat is a time throughout our history that it is meyuad legeula. It is a time for our redemption, and it's a time when Eliyahu Hanavi can come. Every year during Pesach, we are reminded of the words of Chazal, who teach us that ben Nisan nigalu, that we were once redeemed in the month of Nisan, and in the future that we will also be redeemed during this month. But this year, on this special time of Erev Pesach and Shabbat, of the true Shtei Shabbatot, it feels different. And while we're still living in incredibly uncertain and challenging times, let us embrace this moment. Let us embrace this opportunity that is in front of us on this weekend and on this year. Let us not only have a Chag Kasher V'Sameach, let us not just have a joyous and beautiful Pesach with our families, but let us all use this special time of 2 Shabbases, of Erev Pesach falling on Shabbat, leading into the holiday of Pesach. Let's use this time and this year, like so many of its predecessors, and make it a truly and special and remarkable year in all of our lives and in the history of the Jewish people, with the coming of Mashiach speedily in our days. Chag Sameach and Shabbat Shalom.